And thank you so much for joining me in this week's YouTube video. This week, I am sharing a special replay for you that was done during the Middle School Math Summit. I'm sharing this as a special treat just for you, my valued YouTube viewer. So grab your favorite beverage, grab your favorite notebook and Flair pen because so many knowledge gems were dropped during this interview, and I don't want you to miss a thing. Enjoy and let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Middle School Math Summit. I'm your host, Kathy Martin, and I am so excited to bring you our interview with the one and only Jennifer Manley. Jen, thanks so much for being part of this event. I'm so excited to chat and talk all about 5 small shifts that you're going to share with us so that we can work 5 hours less a week. Oh, hell yeah. So, for those who may not know, can you share a little bit about yourself before I dive into all of my questions?
Yeah, totally. So, hi everyone. My name is Jen Manley, and I am an educator. I formerly taught sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th. Started in middle school computer science, moved up to high school computer science, and then I recently transitioned into teaching at the college level. So I teach freshman level, essentially intro computer science at the University of Maryland, one class a semester, which is really nice. And I also create content for teachers. So you may have seen me on social media. I create content on both Instagram and TikTok. And my goal is to help great teachers stay in the profession. So one of the biggest things that I talk about is how do we increase our impact while working less? So still prioritizing ourselves, being a little bit selfish. And I think most importantly, making sure that great teachers don't burn out. I think, when we think about how the profession is currently suffering from a huge retention problem, there are things that we can do so that, if you're somebody who's passionate, you're not getting to the point where you're like, okay, I'm done, I'm out, because we want to keep you in the profession. So I talk a lot about setting boundaries. I talk a lot about communicating those boundaries and then using productivity science to apply to your teacher schedule so that you can get more done in the time that you do have.
That's amazing. And it actually brings me to my very first question for you, because you just mentioned, how do we prioritize? How do we set boundaries? Because you and I both know being a teacher means that we're spinning all the plates, right? And it's not just the working at school plate, it's the whatever we have at home, whether we have a child, children, we're married, you're just balancing all the things. So what are some things that we should keep in mind at the beginning of the year so that we can set ourselves up for success before we dive into your actual breakdown of your 5 small shifts? I would just love to know from you, what can we do now during the summer to prepare ourselves for success, to set ourselves up for success?
Yeah. So one of the first things that I think I would say is that something I learned the hard way is that it is very difficult. It is not very difficult. It is more difficult to take back a commitment than it is to just set those boundaries from the beginning. And so summer is actually a really great time to reflect on what you want your work boundaries to be going into the new school year, because you're a little bit separated from the emotional work of your job. You're a little bit separated from the students. You're living within the rest of your life. And so you're getting to spend lots of time with your family, your friends, your passions, the other things that are so important to you, the other pieces of your identity that are not just teaching. And so summer is a really good time to evaluate, when I look at next school year, what do I want that boundary between school and life to be? And when I think about what my best life looks like during the school year, what boundaries, what rules do I need to set in place for myself, especially around commitments, right? So that I don't take on too much and I don't burn out. So some of these boundaries might look like, I'm only going to redo 2 lessons a unit. I'm going to teach with the lessons that I have from the previous however many years I've been teaching, and I'm going to redo up to 2 lessons a unit, and that's it. right? That could be a boundary. I'm not going to say yes to any other new commitments until I hit after the first quarter, because then I know kind of what the
The
classes that I'm
flow.
working with look
Yeah.
like. I kind of know what the demand is on my time and energy. I'm in a flow. So maybe I'm not going to make any new commitments until after first quarter. Maybe I'm going to set a boundary around how many days I'm going to stay late, right? I'm only going to stay late 2 days a week. I'm not going to bring any work home on the weekends, right? What do you want those boundaries to look like before you get to school? Because when you get back into the groove of school, it becomes that much more difficult to set boundaries because you're around students. So you're tapped into that emotional component. You're surrounded by your colleagues. And so you feel like your
There's
decisions are
pressure.
impacting other people. Yep, there's pressure. And you also have less mental capacity because you're constantly making decisions. And so you may say yes to things that logically don't make sense because you just don't have the full functioning of your brain, right? Because you're doing so many other things.
That's really sound advice. Do you have do you have any suggestions on what we can do or say to when we want to say no, but we don't know how to say no, or we feel guilty about saying, mostly the guilt, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay.
We're
So
going off on a little bit of a tangent, but
no, this is good. So one of the things that I often talk about is that and I struggle with this a lot. Like I would consider myself to be a recovering people
people
pleaser.
pleaser. Uh-huh.
But a lot of times we assign reactions to other people, right? That then make us feel guilty. So I'm assuming, so I'm going to give an example in my own teaching career. My third or fourth year of teaching middle school, I said yes to advising yearbook. Okay. And that was a bad choice because at the time I was advising another major club called the Technology Student Association. I had 4 preps. I had no other teachers teaching any of the classes that I was teaching. So I had nobody to collaborate with. And again, I'm like a second, or I think I was like a third year teacher, right? I should not have said yes to helping with the yearbook. And I said yes because I felt like, well, if I don't do this, somebody else isn't going to do this. And my principal is going to be disappointed in me. And I think sometimes if your brain works like that, if your brain works the way that my brain works, right? We have to be very careful to not assign reactions to other people, right? So if I had said no to my principal, likely he would have just gone to somebody else, right? But I created this story in my head that if I said no, nobody else would say yes, and the kids would suffer. And really, in reality, the yearbook still would have happened. So they would have found somebody else. Maybe it would have been a parent volunteer. Maybe it would have been a combination of teachers who were helping with it. So the first thing I would say is sometimes we assign these moral feelings and these moral judgments to things, and they don't actually exist, right? Like, so guilt is a normal thing to feel. And also, I think stepping back and looking at the situation and saying, how do I know what's making me say that this is going to be the reaction of the other person to me setting this boundary, right? And then the other thing is just having a script. So the first thing that I always suggest to people is if you're new to this, if you're new to saying no, the first thing you can do is give yourself 24 hours. So let's say you're asked to do something and you are somebody, and this was me, who is going to say yes. That's just like, you want to give a reaction on the spot. You're like, yes, I can do it. And you don't really consider your situation. A rule you're going to set for yourself is that you are no longer allowed to say yes immediately. You have to give yourself at least 24 hours. So the way that this would function, and I have a script in my free resource folder, and I'll share it with you, and you can put it in the segment or whatever, so people can see it. But essentially, it's thank you so much for considering me for this opportunity. Something that I'm working on this year is that if I say yes to something, I want to make sure that I can give it 100% because the kids deserve that. The kids deserve somebody who is able to be 100% present. 100% of their energy goes to whatever this new commitment is. And so I just want to make sure before I say yes that I can do that. I'll let you know by tomorrow or by 2 days or however long you need, if this is something that I can commit to. Thank you again for considering me. And so what that does is it allows you to get out of that emotional place that you're in where you want to say yes because you feel guilty, and lets you really consider the totality of your situation, right? Talk to your spouse, talk to your mom, go and look at your calendar, figure out, is this really something that I want to do? And if not, I'm going to say no. And you can use a very similar script when you say no, which is, thank you so much for considering me. I really believe that the kids deserve somebody who can give this 100%. And at this time, I have too many other things on my plate to be able to dedicate the time and energy that's necessary and that the kids deserve, right? So centering the students. And also, no is a complete sentence. You can just say, no, thank you for considering me. But if you need a little bit extra, that's how I would do it.
I love that. Yeah, that is something that I live by. Tell my students all the time that no is a full sentence and it's okay. So good stuff. Okay, so let's dive in. I would love to hear, what are your your 5 small shifts to help us work 5 hours less a week? That's a lot of time savings. So I'm just really looking forward to hearing these strategies.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll start out strong. And I think the first thing, and this is going to sound a little woo-woo, but just stick with me, is that
I love woo, so give it to me.
you have to believe that you can work less. So as educators, there is a lot of discourse going on that says this is just a job that you're giving your life for this job. You're going to be there early, you're going to stay late, you work weekends, you grade at night, right? So the first piece is believing that you can be an effective teacher and work reasonable hours, okay? And along with this, another piece of the mental shift is that I think a lot of teachers struggle when they're working really long hours, right? So like I was working 60-hour weeks, and the thought of working only your contract hours is just so ridiculous because of where you are, that the other piece of this mental shift is my quality of life is going to improve significantly if I can work 1 hour less a week, if I can work 3 hours less a week, if I can work 5 hours less a week, right? So being able to say, number one, it's possible for me to be effective and to work fewer hours. And number two, any movement towards working more sustainably is a massive win, right? My life massively improves if I get 1 hour back, 3 hours back, 5 hours back. And really, like, in your mind, assigning what you're going to give that time to, right? So 1 hour back a week is, I get to go to this fitness class that I really like. 5 hours back a week is, I get to, take my dog on a long walk every day. Or 5 hours back is, I get to listen to an extra audiobook, right? Once a week. I'm a wild person who listens to audiobooks on 2x, but right? Like assigning those pieces that are going to fill that space, because it is a significant improvement to be able to take back some time, even if you're not exactly where you want to be yet. So that would be number one.
Okay, so how do we actually believe it? Because I feel like I could easily be hearing you and thinking to myself, that sounds nice, but you know what I mean? But that's not the reality. So
Totally. Yeah. So truly, I think just challenging yourself to work 1 hour less a week is the way to prove that, right? So it's looking at it as it's an iterative process. So, okay, I'm working 60-hour weeks, and this is where I was. I'm working 60-hour weeks. Can I work 1 hour less? Yes,
so
I
that's
can.
like 15 minutes a day. If you can leave the classroom 15 minutes early.
15 minutes early. Right? Or like,
And that sounds way doable.
Right. It's
I
totally
can leave.
doable, right?
Yeah.
Or
But
like
if you
if you're
ask me to leave
somebody,
an hour earlier, that does not feel doable.
no, and or right. And again, it's whatever makes sense to you. So you could take 15 minutes a day, or you might be somebody that's like, hey, normally I work in a 4 hour block on the weekends. This weekend, I'm going to work a 3 hour block.
3 hour
That's
block.
an hour of time,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and that's funny because I feel like when we give ourselves less time, we do more.
Yeah, so this is a real studied thing. Work expands to fit the space you give it. And
Yes. Yep.
so, and I think like, and I talk about this a lot too, but a big aha moment for me in my I hate the word journey to describe this, but it is what it is, right? To my taking time back journey was this realization that I literally never left with everything done. Even if I was working a 10-hour day or a 12-hour day, there were always more things that I
Yes.
could do. And that is just the nature of the job. Like the nature of teaching is that there will always be more to do. And so that can either feel very overwhelming or can feel very freeing because the
It's
assumption
there tomorrow. It's
is you're
just
not going to finish.
yeah.
So instead of trying to chase doing all of the things, how can we instead, and this is shift number 2, how can we always do the most impactful work first? How can we always do what is most valuable, most important to be able to leave knowing, hey, no matter what, my highest value task got done today and everything else is bonus, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Because I know for me, it's like, is my lesson planning done? As long as my lesson planning is done, whatever,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. Can I
Yep.
batch lesson plan and I'm done?
Right. And I think too, for me, and impact is going to look different for everybody, right? And that's something that I think is really important for teachers to sit down and figure out is like, what is most valuable to me? What is most impactful in my classroom? And for me, like I am always going to center students. And I think that's true for most educators, right? And what that looks like looks different for everybody, but I will always prioritize work that immediately impacts kids over any other new initiative, paperwork. I am willing, and this is the other thing, right? Like we're balancing all of these different pieces. You're not given enough time to do all of them. You also have to be willing to let a ball drop, right? So if I'm looking at, here's this new initiative that was just given to me, okay? They're asking me to do some sort of survey. And I don't have time because this week, the most important thing is I've got to get all my lesson planning done. And I'm preparing students for an exam, which means all of their grading, all the grades need to be back to them in order for them to prepare for that exam. I can't do the survey this week. So I need to be willing to say, hey, I will get to this. I'm not going to get to it this week. So either you're not getting my answers or you can wait and you can get my answers next week, right? And being able to communicate that.
Yeah, when I have stuff like that, and I probably shouldn't say this, but like a survey that goes out in an email, if I don't get to it, I don't get to it. And then it's like, well, is someone gonna like come back and check on the fact that I didn't do that thing? You know what I mean? Like, nah, I I'm not gonna necessarily prioritize it until like I get yelled at for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and
Like,
this is okay, so this is number 3. Number 3 is be willing to manage up your administrator. So something that and I had other jobs before I taught, but something that we don't do enough in education is have that like back and forth dialogue with our administrator about workload, right? So obviously, we get observed, we have those conversations with administrators in that capacity, but in any other job, right, your manager's role, part of their role is to help you be successful. And if you were in a situation where you had too much on your plate, that would be a conversation that you could have with the administrator to say, hey, or with your manager, right? Can you help me to prioritize this work? I don't have enough time to get all of these things done. I've gone through, I've figured out how much time it should take me. I don't have enough time what are your highest priorities, right? And having that conversation, being willing to say, listen, here's what I think. Here's what I think the highest priorities are, which means these three things are not going to get done, or they're not going to get done this week. They're going to get done next week or the week after. Do these priorities align with your priorities? Right? And having that conversation, you know, may open your administrator's eyes. They may not know because nobody else has said anything. Or they may help you redefine those priorities, and then you know you're doing the work that's most important, right?
I love that. I've never had a conversation with my administrator about
I know.
workload. And I think that's probably typical. You just tend to kind of, like you're just wrapped up in your own little world, right? Like of your classroom.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, administrators also have so much on their plate.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be on teachers to have to figure out how to do all the things when they don't have enough time or feel guilty about not getting things done. So having those conversations and raising it can help to have, a wider conversation in the school about like, what does workload look like and what's actually valuable, what's actually important here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's number 4?
Okay, number 4 is know where your time is actually going and don't overcommit. So this is a two-parter. The first part is that we might think we know where our time is going, but you would be surprised how much time you actually have in the school day to get things done and how much time you're maybe using in ways that you don't want. So I'll give an example of this. When I first did, and I use a time audit to do this, when I first audited my time, I was spending 10 minutes going and getting mail from my mailbox because it was at the other end of the school when I was avoiding doing certain work, right? And actually the most efficient way for me to get that mail was when I was coming in because I was entering through that main entrance, grab the mail, go back to my classroom, and then having a plan for my planning time, right? Knowing exactly how I'm going to use it so that I get it done in work hours, and then I have the rest of my life once I'm done with the school day. So number 1 is knowing where your time is actually going and not being judgmental about it, right? So just observing. And the best way to do this is to do, if you're in school, do a time audit. So actually track your time and where it's going. If you're out of school, you can do basically a walkthrough of your day in your mind, right? And kind of just try to map out your day in 15-minute chunks. It's not going to be perfect, but it will help you to maybe think through all of the different things that you're doing. The second piece of this is understanding understanding how much time you have and then not overcommitting with how much work you say you're going to get done. Okay. So if you look at your workday and you have 2 total hours of work time, you are going to fail if you give yourself 6 hours of work to do.
So you need like buffer space. Is that what you're saying?
It's not even buffer space. It's just understanding like, okay, so for example, let's say I have 2 total hours of work, right? I'm going to go through my to-do list and I'm going to estimate how much time each of the tasks on that list is going to take. If I have 6 hours of tasks, but I only have 2 hours to work in,
I see.
I'm only going to commit to 2 hours of work, right?
And you got to let the other stuff go for today.
Yeah. Yeah.
But often I feel like I always underestimate how, like, I think like grading these papers, that's going to take me like 15 minutes, but really it's like 30 minutes. So I like underestimate. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
yep. So time estimating is actually a skill. And the more
I'm very
you do
bad
it,
at it.
yeah, totally right. But the more you do it, the better you'll get. And one thing that I would suggest if you find that you are doing it regularly and you are bad at it is instead of estimating for a little bit, just track and write down how much time it's taking you. So for example, right, math teachers looking at your different types of tasks that you grade, right? Homework versus exam versus project, like categorize it based on type of thing that you're grading and then track it. So take 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever it is, and just track how long it takes you to grade each of those types of tasks. And now you've got a pretty good estimate, right? You also can give yourself buffer. So like you said, right? Like if you know that you're bad at estimating and you have only 2 hours, then only commit to an hour and a half of work. That gives you a 30-minute buffer, 33% more time to be able to kind of flex that work that you know you have to get done.
So in a situation like that, if I like gave myself, if I had 2 hours and I thought I was going to finish an hour and a half, and I did finish in an hour and a half, like I picked, say, the 3 things I was planning on doing, and it was going to take me an hour and a half, and it did. Now I have 30 minutes. What do I, like, if I am so wonderful and great and have extra time, what should I do with that extra time? Even like when it's unplanned or when it's unaccounted for.
Yeah. So this is why the first, I think, well, not the first is mindset. The second one is always do the most impactful things first. When you prioritize your list of tasks, if you have extra time, you know exactly where to go on that task list.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
So if
it's
I'm
not like, let me just sit and relax for a second. It's
so you could, right? So that's the other thing. It's like you actually can do that, right? So you could look at it either of the 2 ways. So you can look at it as, I had 2 hours to work today. I knocked out all of my stuff in an hour and a half. I'm going to just relax. I'm good. I got done with the things that I said I was going to get done with today, and I'm good. And I'm going to take a little breather. And that is phenomenal. Or potentially you still have a few things that, you know, if you do them today, you're going to feel way less stressed tomorrow. So I'm going to go ahead and knock those out. And I'm going to hold myself accountable to still leaving on time. Like me trying to fill this 30 minutes is not an excuse for me to
stay
then
later.
do a little workful.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good reminder.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the very last thing, and we already talked about it a little bit, is that recognizing that this work is iterative. Productivity is something that you are going to need to practice, notice, revise, and continue to get better at, right? And so, again, like looking at all of it, if you're somebody who's just getting started with bringing in productivity, efficiency, all of that into your work, like just think of it as an experiment. We're going to test it. Some things are going to work. Some things are not going to work as well. And the things that work, we're going to lean on. We're going to double down on. We're going to look at strategies that fail and figure out, you know, get curious about it. Is there some way I could tweak this that would work better for me? If so, great. If not, we can let it go and we can, you know, like I said, double down on what is working. Because like we said at the very beginning, when you prove to yourself that you can get work done effectively in less time, it gives you permission to continue to keep working less, right? Because if I can be effective in 55 hours a week, I can still be effective in 50, right? And we just continue to move. Yeah.
So is that the, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, that's what I'm looking for to know if it's working, or like whatever it is I'm doing is working, is that I can see, oh, I am leaving on time, or how else will I know if things are working?
Yeah. So what's so interesting about teaching, and I talk about this a lot too, is that it's not actually just about the time. Like in my opinion, what teachers are really looking for is calm. Teachers are constantly in a state of chaos because you are working and on from the time you arrive to the time you leave. It's not
that's why we're exhausted on Friday. By
Correct.
Friday, we're done. Yeah.
Correct. It's exhausting because your brain literally never gets a break. You are constantly thinking about the next thing. You are constantly managing multiple competing priorities. And so Yeah, totally. Working less is part of it. But the reason that I talk about working sustainably and not just work your contract hours is because, in my opinion, what teachers really are after is being able to do their job effectively and then have energy for the rest of their life, right? So it's not just about working less, it's also about finding ways to streamline your work. So like you mentioned batching. Batching is a wonderful strategy that does save you time, but more importantly, batching saves you mental load because you're not constantly switching between the tasks that you're doing. You're saying, Wednesdays are my grading days. And on Wednesdays, the only thing that I'm concerned about outside of teaching my classes is grading. Mondays are my lesson planning days, right? Like whatever it is for you. And you may end up, I know a lot of teachers who grade on 2 days a week, right? They grade on Wednesdays and Fridays or whatever it is, Tuesdays and Thursdays. But still, some of the productivity strategies that you implement are to take back time, but all of them are to take back that mental energy so that you have energy for the rest of your life, because teaching is an identity, but it's just part of your identity. And I think what we're really after is finding a way to make sure that we have energy for the rest of our life too, you know?
Jen, this was so wonderful. Can you share a little bit about your Sprint to Summer resource that you've included for our VIP attendees? If you have not upgraded to a VIP ticket, you're going to want to, because this resource is going to be amazing. Can't wait to hear all about it. So tell us.
Okay, so Sprint to Summer is a really awesome 7 day. So designed to be consumed over 7 days, and it's 7 days of mini trainings to help you break down all of your back to school prep in terms of priority and time so that you get the most important work done and you go into the new school year with a plan of how you're going to tackle your teacher prep week. So we use Trello, which is a really easy to use software. And we talk through, and it's free. Yeah, it's totally free. You'll get a template. So I created a template. You'll get that template. And each day, and you could do it totally all at once if you wanted to, but again, designed to be broken down if you want. But each day you'll walk through a step of thinking through, what does it look like for me to be ready for students to arrive? And how much time do each of those tasks take me? Which are most important? We'll teach you how to order based on priority and essentially tackle all of your back to school prep in the least amount of time possible, and hopefully all totally during your teacher prep week.
And we're going to do something special, right? Like I'm going to do this with you. I'm going to like guinea pig.
Yeah.
And I'm going to kind of maybe pick like 3 back to school tasks. And then you're going to help me break it down and how to prioritize and all.
Yes. So we'll have, So we'll have a video walking through Kathy's example.
I have no idea what I'm going to pick, so I'm going to have to think about it.
It's going to be great. And then the actual mini course also includes my example as well. So you'll get to see 2 in action.
Awesome. Awesome. Where can we learn more about you online?
Totally. So I am on both TikTok and Instagram at Strategic Classroom. You also can go to jenmanleyedu.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We will see everyone over in our bonus interview. Bye.
Bye.